Hegseth sat completely still at the witness table, his hands pressed flat against the dark wood, fingers spread slightly as if trying to steady himself. The two directives lay side by side in front of Senator Elizabeth Warren like evidence in a trial, 48 hours apart, same signature on both. Two completely contradictory instructions about the physical standards every American service member must meet to be certified combat ready. Warren did not raise her voice. She spoke with the quiet precision of someone who had studied every line. She let the silence stretch for several seconds, forcing the entire Senate Armed Services Committee hearing room to focus on those two pieces of paper. Mr. Hegseth, she began, I want to direct your attention to two documents you personally signed this March. First, Pentagon Readiness Directive 2025-14 dated March 11th. She lifted the document, holding it steady so the cameras could capture it clearly. It states, and I quote, Physical fitness assessment standards for combat readiness certification will maintain current Army Field Manual benchmarks without modification until a comprehensive review process is completed. Those are your words. That is your signature at the bottom. Is that correct? Hegseth nodded once. That directive reflects a standard review process, Senator. Warren didn't move on. She simply asked again, calmly. Is that your signature on Directive 2025-14? A short pause. Yes. She set the first document down and immediately picked up the second, placing it directly beside the first so both were visible to everyone in the room and on the live feed. Pentagon Readiness Directive 2025-17, signed by you on March 13th, just 48 hours later. This one reads, Physical fitness assessment standards for combat readiness certification are hereby modified to allow unit commanders discretionary authority to adjust benchmarks based on operational context. She looked up at him. Same standards, same signature, 48 hours. Mr. Hegseth, you changed military readiness standards in 48 hours. Why? The room felt heavier. This was not the scripted exchange many had expected from a budget and personnel hearing. Warren had come prepared with 5 folders arranged in exact sequence. Hegseth, flanked by 3 senior Pentagon staffers and 2 attorneys seated directly behind him, had entered the room carrying the composed expression of a man who had survived previous appearances before this committee. That composure was beginning to slip. Warren continued without giving him room to breathe. Directive 2025-14 explicitly required a comprehensive review before any changes could be made. Yet, 48 hours later, you issued Directive 2025-17 that grants commanders the power to adjust those very benchmarks. Did the comprehensive review you ordered somehow finish in less than 2 days? Hegseth shifted in his seat. One of his staffers leaned forward and whispered quickly behind him. He cleared his throat. Senator, the 2 directives address different aspects of readiness assessment. 2025-14 establishes the baseline framework, while 2025-17 provides operational flexibility within that framework for commanders in the field. Warren's expression remained unchanged. She reached for the 3rd folder and placed a new document on the table with deliberate care. This is a memorandum from the Pentagon's own Office of General Counsel, prepared internally just 4 days after you signed Directive 2025-17. I want to read one paragraph verbatim. Her voice stayed measured as she read. Directive 2025-17 effectively modifies the benchmark standards established in Directive 2025-14 by granting unit commanders authority to deviate from those benchmarks without the comprehensive review process specified in 2025-14. She lowered the memo and looked directly across the table. Your own legal counsel is telling you, and now telling this committee, that Directive 2025-17 did exactly what Directive 2025-14 said could not be done without a full review. In 48 hours. How do you explain that contradiction, Mr. Hegseth? The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Hegseth's lead attorney leaned in this time, speaking urgently for nearly 15 seconds. When the secretary finally responded, his voice was tighter. Senator, the operational environment in early March required rapid adaptation. The flexibility provided in 2025-17 was necessary to ensure commanders had the tools they needed to maintain readiness in dynamic conditions. Warren immediately countered. Rapid adaptation? She opened the 4th folder and slid another report forward. This is the Pentagon's own readiness assessment report covering January through March of this year. Let me draw your attention to the operational threat assessment section for the precise window between March 11th and March 13th. She read the classification, routine, no elevated threat designation, no active deployment orders, no emergency operational conditions. Warren looked back at him. Your department assessed the environment as routine during the exact 48 hours when you issued these two conflicting directives. So I ask you again, what demanded this sudden change to combat fitness standards under routine conditions? A Republican senator from Mississippi leaned into his microphone, stating for the record that the documents raised legitimate questions about process that deserved thorough answers. But Warren was already moving to her final piece of evidence. She placed the fifth and final document on the table. This is a letter signed by 14 current and former senior military officers. Their combined service record exceeds 300 years. They wrote directly to this committee after learning the contents of Directive 2025-17. She read the most critical sentence slowly. The discretionary authority granted in Directive 2025-17, absent the comprehensive review process specified in its predecessor directive, creates the conditions for inconsistent readiness standards across units that could compromise operational effectiveness and soldier safety. Warren folded her hands on the table and looked at Hegseth for a long moment. Your own legal counsel confirms the modification bypassed the required review. Your own threat assessment confirms conditions were routine. 14 officers with 3 centuries of collective experience warned that these changes could endanger soldiers. All of this unfolded in 48 hours under your signature. Mr. Hegseth, why? Hegseth sat motionless. The staffer behind him had stopped leaning forward. His attorney had set down his pen. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. He finally offered, Senator, I am confident that both directives were issued in full compliance with Pentagon protocols and that the flexibility provided in 2025-17 enhances rather than undermines military readiness. Warren let his words echo unanswered. Then she spoke one last time. You have not explained the 48-hour reversal. You have not explained why the review you yourself required was apparently unnecessary. And you have not explained why senior officers believe this decision could compromise the safety of the men and women who wear the uniform. She turned to the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I move to enter all 5 documents into the official congressional record. Directive 2025-14, Directive 2025-17, the Pentagon Legal Counsel Memorandum, the March Readiness Threat Assessment, and the letter from the 14 senior officers. The motion passed unanimously, with no objection. As the gavel sounded, Pete Hegseth gathered his notes and exited through a side corridor, avoiding the cluster of reporters waiting at the main entrance. He gave no statements, no explanations, no answers. What occurred in that hearing room was not political spectacle. It was a methodical presentation of the Pentagon's own documents, exposing an unexplained sudden shift in military fitness standards. 2 directives, 48 hours, 1 signature on both, and no response that could withstand the weight of the evidence placed on that table. If these documents and this exchange matter to you, if you believe the men and women serving in our military deserve consistent, transparent, and justified standards, then hit the like button right now. Drop the word standards in the comments so I know you watched until the end. I read every comment. This is exactly why sustained public oversight matters. If you want more detailed breakdowns of these kinds of hearings and what they actually mean for our armed forces, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We will follow exactly what happens to these 5 documents now that they are permanently part of the congressional record. 48 hours, 2 opposite orders, 1 unanswered question. The record is public. The silence remains on the table.